Hey, welcome to the podcast. I am Joel here with my dad.
And I'm Rick. So glad you're here today.
So, Dad, today I want to talk about education. And I think you had a very unique take on education. You are highly educated. I mean, you have your master's degree in education and you almost have a PhD.
Right.
And but what I noticed growing up is there were a lot of my friends that when they would get a bad grade, man, they didn't want to go home. But I didn't feel that fear. But what I did feel fear of was when you sensed a bad attitude in me towards school, or me intentionally not putting forth my full effort in a certain school. Like, I mean, you figured out early on I was just bad at math, right? So I would come home with bad grades in math, but I didn't get a lot of your wrath. But man, if I started showing attitude towards the teacher in math, you would pounce on that. So I noticed early on that you were way more concerned about kind of character and attitude than you were about the tangibleness of grades, which is very opposite of what most of the world, I think, says. There's if you don't get if you don't get the best grades, you'll never be a success in life. Yeah. You clearly had a different take on that. So let's say this from an educated person that you are, what's the value of education?
Well, I tell you what, if you want to answer the value of education, the one thing I learned with my master's and the PhD study, the one thing I really learned is that you can do something that you don't want to do, that you see absolutely no value in doing. You can do it well and you can do it on time. That's the value of education.
Which you could get that in the military too, though, right?
You sure could.
Yeah.
You sure could. Ecclesiastes talks about it being like sharpening a saw. Or sharpening an axe. I think it's Ecclesiastes 10:10. You can cut down a tree with a dull axe, but with a sharp axe, it comes a lot easier.
Yeah.
So an education can help you get through life. But what you're talking about is the idea of character and personal development of character over education. And I always felt, it's more important to educate the spirit, because if all you're doing is educating the mind, all you're really doing is creating a more slick sinner. You're able to get away with things because you're just smarter and you're sharper. And so you've got to be educating the soul and the spirit, because those are the things that really matter. And so that's why, I want you to do the best you can. I want you to have a good attitude in it. But the education stuff, and pretty much too, we call, when you graduate, like from high school, you graduate from college, we call it commencement. Mm-hmm. You can now commence learning.
Yeah. Because
basically all you're getting in school is the foundations. You learn to read, you learn to write. If you get those things down, from there on out, if that's the last book you ever read, you're going to be ignorant in a year or two.
Man, and isn't that that's the case of so many people I see, is they think that the degree is the end all, that, no, I've got the degree now.
Yeah.
And it's like, no.
That's the
just
commence.
Yeah, and really, honestly, the stuff you learn in school may actually need to be completely undone when you hit the real world.
Exactly, yeah, that's true.
In some cases.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the science, technology, the STEM fields, it's a little bit different. But in a lot of the liberal arts fields and stuff like that, I've found you got to unlearn a lot of the theory out there to see how it works in the real world.
Well, even in science, the facts change. This is the hardcore fact.
Oh, that's true.
And then they find a new fact, and now that's the hardcore. That's the ultimate truth.
But wait a second. I thought, we found new information.
Yeah. And now this is the ultimate truth until we find new information.
Which is interesting, because it's kind of like making education. I think this is a major concern with, and I've seen this with a lot of good, well-meaning families, is if you make an education a god, it will quickly let you down.
Yeah, it's very easy to think that I have to give somehow help my kids get ahead. They have to get the education at the best school. I've seen it financially ruin families because they're suffering and paying for an education when the kid decides, I want to be an architect. Okay, we're going to send the architect school. In the third year, I don't like architecture. I think I want to be a mechanic. Oh no, maybe I'll be a painter.
Right.
And parents keep paying for this thing. It's like crazy,
Which I didn't have that problem, because you didn't pay for my college education, my undergrad.
Right.
And I remember feeling a little bit upset about that at first. I'm grateful now, because, man, it made me, I didn't waste any time in college. I didn't just take classes just to find myself.
Yeah.
I went in there and I got her done. But
well, see,
how about that?
I did the same thing. I worked my way through college.
See how much that education has helped my vocabulary. I got her done.
Yeah, I'm glad you paid for it and I didn't.
That's right. I ended up at a state school. I'm just kidding.
And it shows. So anyhow, the point is, I don't even know what the point is now. I can't even remember what we were talking about. But
No, you didn't pay for my education.
yeah, if you've been to college, you know college is not full time. I mean, full time is not full time.
Yeah, I agree. What now? Okay, so there are some personality types that it probably is full time. Am I being too gracious?
I think so.
Okay,
you being
maybe
too
not.
gracious.
I mean, I worked full time and studied up to 21 hours per semester, but I'm pretty high capacity.
Yeah, and then you went, and I mean, I was working, well, technically part time, but full time.
Yeah.
And I was putting in full time hours at a church, getting paid part time.
Well, and again, it comes down to two is like how fast do you want it. So I managed to squeeze 4 years into 6.
Yeah.
So, which a lot of people though, it's like, well, if I don't get it in 4 years, I'm behind everyone
Yeah,
else.
and it's not a race.
Yeah, which was a thought I had for me.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that.
Yeah, I remember. I was a little bit upset that when I was in high school, you didn't really help me through the school process. And now I was conflicted because I had a guidance counselor. I remember she said, well, where are you going to go to college? I'm like, well, nowhere. And she's like, well, we're not going to put nowhere on the commencement announcement. And I was like, she's like, pick a school that you might possibly go to. Because we're, and I was like,
well, it was a missionary kid school,
yeah,
so
it's like
everybody's
high
going
achiever,
to college.
yeah. And I was like, I'm not going anywhere. So I was a little bit upset about it, but then part of me is like, I'm going to stick it to the man. I'm not going anywhere, right? But I remember I was a year in, 2 years, 3 years into working, and all my friends are about to graduate, and I'm like, oh man, I'm behind what everybody else is. And you get this idea of the process of education.
Yeah.
Formal education needs to be high school, then college, then master's degree, whatever. Now, ultimately, I got a master's degree, very different timeline than everybody else. And all of my other friends had moved on, had multiple kids before I'm even starting to get my master's degree or whatever.
Yeah.
But it worked out. But
well, and sometimes, like, to me, it's like right out of high school, who knows what they want to do anyway?
that is a big thing, I think. And that's where I think with the cost of education, the drive, the societal push to say you've got to go right into college, man, it ends up being a very costly endeavor. Because if you're going without scholarships or anything, especially if you go to a private college or you don't go to a community college, and then when you're doing that, it's like every mistake you make or misguided step where it's like, oh, I've decided I'm going to change career. Well,
this course doesn't count.
$14,000 of those classes won't count. Like $14,000. That's like, that's a minimum wage job. Like, so it is in some ways, I think education has. Well, obviously, it's gotten way out of balance. The value we place on it, the cost of it is definitely out of balance.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just...
That's kind of a scam, but we don't want to go there on that.
Yeah,
one.
we'll go into this. Yeah. Mark Cuban talks about that, how he thinks there's pretty soon the piper's going to come a-calling for colleges and what's happening. And
yeah, it's a scam.
It is. But so much of it's because of this societal thing that to succeed, you've got to go to college. And I want to talk about that because I've seen... Man, there's this one guy I know that he is the most brilliant guy I know, and he is killing it in his business. But when he gets around, educated people, he never went to college. I don't think he even started college. Like he never went. He just started his own business, and man, he's just very successful, and he's employing all these people that went to college.
Yeah.
But when he gets around these people that go to college, I see him kind of clam up. And I asked him one time, I'm like, dude, why you get all insecure around us? He's like, well, you guys all went to college, and I'm like, dude. We're like, you're the smartest guy in the room, hands down. You just don't have a paper that proves it.
Right.
And I think that's a big misconception people have all the time. Is
that is one thing that is, again, like one of the things that college did help me with. I began to realize that this guy may not be that smart. He just read different books than me.
Yeah.
And so, so he's over here talking about this big high-flying topic, and I'm like clueless as to even what the terminology he's using means, And so it's really easy to feel insecure and just realize, well, I could talk to him about leadership theories or something and throw out names that he wouldn't recognize too. And it's got nothing to do with intelligence. It's just, well, if I wanted to know that, I could read those books too and be as smart as him because he wasn't born knowing that.
That's right. There's so much to know that it's kind of college is helping you. Or even any degree of study, or any level of study is helping you kind of, I guess, elementary education and middle school and high school is kind of an overall view to figure out what you want. But
even the first couple years of college, that's why they take intro to this, intro to that, intro to this.
Figuring out what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me jump in. We've started already attacking education here, but education definitely has some value. I mean, we both have master's degrees, so we both agree that it has value. And I love an analogy you always gave to me. I remember one time talking to a guy, and or a girl, and she was like, well, my dad said I don't need college, and I was like, well, you don't need college to be successful, but I'll tell you, education is a powerful tool. And I used an analogy, something you gave me. You want to share it?
Yeah, it's like a key.
Yeah.
That sometimes you'll get to a door that would only be opened if you have a bachelor's or if you have a master's or if you have a PhD or something,
right.
you know. And so it's a key that you can keep in your pocket. You don't have to flail it around and say, look at the key I have, you know. You don't have to put it on the wall of your office, you know. But you've got that key if you ever get to that door. And then you can open it because, yeah, I've got the degree.
And the challenge with it is sometimes you don't realize the door isn't opening to you.
Right.
I see that a lot of times. I remember one time I was in a conversation with a guy and I was trying to convince him of something that I was doing. And he was very resistant because his daughter was trying to get involved with it.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, blah, 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 and then blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, da, da, da. And when I got out of college, I decided to do this. He's like, oh, wait, you went to college? I'm like, yeah, dude, I have a bachelor's degree. And he's like, oh, and all of a sudden his attitude changed.
Yeah.
And now, that's pathetic. That guy should not have had an attitude shift because I have a stupid piece of paper.
Right.
But he did.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it. A lot of times we live in a world where man looks on the outward appearance.
Yeah.
God looks on the heart, but man still looks on the outward appearance.
And if you're gonna be working with men, you need to be concerned with what the outward appearance is. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's that key. It's the key that you don't know what doors aren't opening because you don't have that degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I had an opportunity early on when I was finishing my master's degree. A fellow asked me if we'd go to Redondo Beach to be a principal of a school there. And we were praying about it and thinking about it. He called me back and he said, oh, you know what? And I knew this door closed, but I wouldn't have known normally. He said, oh, you know, I've talked to our superintendent of schools here. And he said, if you had your master's finished, it'd be great, but we can't bring you on if you don't have it finished. You know? And so there was a door that closed. And I just happened to find out. But normally you would have just gotten a letter of rejection.
Right.
But I happen to know the pastor of the church, you know.
So he was a little more disclosure.
He told me about it, yeah. But you don't know what, like you say. You know, looking at this from a biblical stance, though, too, let's look at it there. You know, I know coming from kind of my background, there was a lot of emphasis upon, well, God uses ignorant and unlearned fishermen, you know, and you've got a story in Acts where...
Well, and you see a lot of people reveling in their ignorance because of that.
Yeah, you look there, you know, God, and you go to that story in Acts, and it's Peter and John, and when the Pharisees saw them, they took note that they were ignorant and unlearned fishermen, but they took note that they had been with Jesus. And so based on that, you preach the sermon, God uses ignorant, unlearned people. You just have to be with Jesus, spend time with Jesus, you know. But, and to a degree, that's okay.
There's definitely an element of truth to that.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you read what Peter wrote later, and he said, add to your faith virtue, and to your faith knowledge.
Virtue, knowledge.
Yeah. And so he realized that virtue is more important, but knowledge is important too. So here Peter is saying, don't remain an ignorant, unlearned fisherman.
Right.
But then on the other hand, you have Paul, who was highly educated, and he met with them on Mars Hill, and he debated with the smartest of the smartest. And he comes away from there realizing this isn't the key. And so he says to the Corinthians, he said, I came to you. He was like from the Harvard, the School of Gamaliel. That was the most famous school.
Highly
educated. He comes to them,
dude.
highly educated. And he comes to them saying, I've determined to know nothing among you but Christ and him crucified. And so if we're ignorant, don't stay there. Go out and sharpen the axe. But if you're wise, don't count on your wisdom.
Well, and there's the element of Paul. I mean, God used Paul to articulate some uber deep truths in the Bible, and it was because of his education that he had the capacity. I mean, God probably could have done it however he wanted, but he chose Paul, and he humbled him so that his education wasn't. I mean, Paul even says that. He's like, hey, you think you got reason to brag? I've got more.
Right.
And then he like lays out his list. He's like, but I consider all that as junk or dung. Is that what it is? Dung? Yeah. That's so. Paul's. It's like he had to get the education, and then God had to make him realize the education wasn't the important thing. The virtue, like Peter said, add knowledge to virtue, but it starts with virtue first. That reminds me of
faith, virtue, not.
Reminds me of something Nassim Taleb, one of my favorite authors, said. He said, education makes the wise slightly wiser, but it makes the fool dangerous. So unless you have wisdom, education is just going to make you really dangerous. Which is what you see a lot of times is, well, I have the degree, but they have no real world experience, and then they're governing, you know, like maybe in government, they go straight into government and they make all these things, and all there's unintended consequences happen from these lofty ideas, and people get hurt because of it.
Yeah.
But then they never take the blame for it because they're like, well, but I'm the educated one. Like, you just need to get in line with what education says. Like, no.
And it obviously can't be that my theory was flawed.
Right. Yeah.
It's just that you didn't do it right or something. Yeah,
That's what's tricky about it. So education's one of those things, and I think one of the other scary things about it is the idea that, and you touched on this a second ago, once I've got the education, I've arrived. But really, I mean, education is, was it Paul that said to Timothy, study to show yourself approved? Like, studying is an ongoing, if you just studied to get through high school or college or whatever it was, that's not enough. Studying is an ongoing discipline, and educating yourself is something ongoing, because education, I mean, really education is, which is weird. This is what's weird about it is, if you really think about it, education is about humility. It's acknowledging there's stuff you don't know.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
Yet you can get arrogant once you've got the stuff you know. But it should really make you realize there's a whole bunch of more stuff you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets...
It's kind of like coming to know God. The person who thinks they know God hasn't even figured out the first step yet.
Yeah.
Because the more you get to know Him, the more you realize,
That's right.
I don't even know anything.
That's why you get to people that are like 30 years in their walk with God, and they're like, man, I don't know anything about serving God.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Peter, it's interesting because Peter said, our brother Paul, who writes these great things, Peter couldn't even understand
He's like, I
some
don't
of the
even
stuff
understand
Paul
it, right?
wrote.
Yeah.
It's like, they're hard to understand, he
There's
says.
something there. I don't get it, but yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a place for both. I think the key in all that is Paul had to be humbled, and Peter had to realize the value of knowledge. So the key is, if you're proud of your humility, or if you're proud, not of your humility, if you're proud of your ignorance, well, by golly, God's going to use me because I'll just been with Jesus. If you're proud of your ignorance, God resists the proud.
Yeah.
But if you're proud of your education, God resists the proud. Whichever side you're coming from, God stiff arms, pushes away the proud, but embraces the humble. And I've just seen, as you mentioned earlier, so many people that have made an idol. They send their kids off to college, and it's crazy because at this most decisive time of their life, when the kids are kind of figuring out their future and figuring out who they are, well, let's just turn them over to the secular professors, or even just throw them out there even to a Christian college,
Yeah.
which is a little better, but you need to, I think that's a time when you need, as a parent, to be shaping them, because the weaknesses in their character, the weaknesses in their nature. They go off to even a Christian college, and they're pretty much on their own. And so when we just kind of throw these kids out at a time when it's probably the most crucial times of their lives.
Which is why I think it's so, I think Christian educators and Christian education, like truly biblical, and is so key. I mean, that's why we need really, like, people that are really serving the Lord with a godly mindset on the world, serving in these secular institutions, because I mean, the secular institution, you don't expect them to teach your kids godly principles. They don't believe them.
No.
But yet education is such a mission field, really. I mean, I think of people that, well, particularly elementary teachers, the amount they get paid and then what they do. It's like, I mean, I'm forever grateful. I'll be forever grateful. Even just in the last 2 years, the little preschool we're sending Elise to, just the stuff they're teaching her, I'm like, man, what a call. And I know they're not making a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
But it's education, really. Educators, you really have to do it for the call, except in the upper echelons, which, college professors.
You want them to be called too, because you want there to be a gifting there to be able to do it. Because there is a certain gifting that has the insight, not just slap the material up on the board. I know when I was in my master's degree program, the head of the education department, the School of Education, was one of my teachers. And he said this, he says, as teachers, he said, do not look to college teachers as examples. We are the worst teachers there are.
He said, we're the worst.
He said, we are the worst there are. Because we just throw the material up on the board. If you get it, you get it. If I've got tenure, if all my classes fails, doesn't matter to me.
Wow.
He said, he said, don't look to us. Because and his theory was this: you have not taught until the student has learned.
Wow, so the burden, you would say, is on the teacher, the educator.
Which it should be.
Yeah.
And so you just throw it up on the board and they go, wow, they just didn't learn it. They didn't study. Well, then somehow you need to present it in a different way. But if you're a college professor, you don't really care. You get paid the same either way.
Some of them don't.
I know, that's not true. But he was just saying, don't look to the average college professor.
Well, and it's like anything, though. I mean, there are people that are truly gifted in what they're doing, and then there are people who do it as a job.
That's why I say you really want the call
Yeah.
for more reasons than just the ability.
And a quick way to weed them out is pay them low. Is that what it is? I don't know. It's like seems to be the way it works,
works for
right?
missionaries.
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, education is such a huge call because it is so. Well, I mean, my people, for lack of knowledge, my people are destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean, there's knowledge, but then there's the other thing, and I think this is what's important that you drove into me is knowledge means nothing without wisdom, and wisdom is the right application of knowledge, which that's a challenge with school, is because we learn a lot of knowledge, but we don't necessarily learn the right application of it.
You don't see how to apply it, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we all have that one teacher that just made it all come clear to us,
Yeah.
and we are so grateful to that one teacher. But that's part of the danger is Richard Rohr talks about what he calls the limousine liberal, and Richard Rohr's pretty liberal himself, but he's like he says these limousine liberals drive me crazy because he's like they have just enough education to talk semi-knowledgeably about stuff, but he's like, but they really don't. They hang their hat on the education that they have, and he talks about the danger of that.
Yeah.
He's like they're really actually quite ignorant, but because they have the piece of paper, they run around and they talk down to everyone like, well, I'm educated and you're uneducated.
Yeah. Well, that's said if God resists the proud.
Yeah.
The other side of that is you've got your knowledge, you've got wisdom, but without the character, those all amount to nothing. And you see that illustrated in the wisest man that ever lived, Solomon. And yet at the end of his life, he's serving pagan gods, he's serving Baal, he's serving Molech, and he ends up losing it all. Well, he didn't because of his father's righteousness. He said, I'm not going to do this to you, but I'm going to take the kingdom away from your son. He ends up losing it because he had knowledge, he had wisdom, but he didn't have the character.
Yeah.
And so all those three, and that's why it's
It can make you a more adept, just makes you a more adept,
a better sinner.
Yeah.
So that's why, again, you go back to Peter. Add to your faith virtue, and your virtue knowledge. Build it upon a foundation of character and a foundation of faith.
So here's a question. I talk to a lot of guys who never went to college. They're probably the smartest guys I know, but they have this deep insecurity about not having the education. What suggestion would you make to somebody who feels insecure that I never got that education? Is it something that like you should drop everything and go get the degree just so you have it, or is it?
Probably not. I mean, if that is, it's funny what a piece of paper will make some people feel like.
That's true.
You remember the Wizard of Oz? If you read the story, all through it all, the Scarecrow's the one figuring out all the problems, and what to do. But at the end, he doesn't feel smart until the wizard says, I know lots of people know smarter than you. What you need is a diploma. And he gives him the diploma, E equals MC squared. And all of a sudden, he's this genius, but all throughout it, so if that's what it takes. I
forgot about that part of the movie. That's right.
That's what that all
was. He the one that wanted a brain?
He's the one that wanted a brain.
Yeah, if I only had a brain. Yeah.
If I only had a brain, yeah. And so he gets the diploma, and all of a sudden now he's a genius. So if that's what it takes to make you feel like a genius, go do it. But really, what would be more reasonable would be just take advantage. When I went to college, I thought I was just going to be like this open bucket. Man, I'm going to go in there and they're just going to pour this knowledge into me. I'm just going to come out. So what? It's just like high school. They make you read books. They say, here, go home, read this book. You can read the book without them.
Yeah.
Just find a book on the topic that you want to know.
You have to print up your own diploma, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's not hard. I mean, you can get those online,
I mean, that's true. That's true for me. I mean, I've been the last few years, I try and read about 100 books a year. And I would say I've learned more in the last, of course, education builds, right? So you learn how to learn how to learn, and then you get more.
Then you understand this, which helps you understand that.
Yeah, and so stuff it builds on it. So, but the great thing about that is you don't have to go to school. You don't have to build on a foundation of a piece of paper. You can build on a foundation of reading in your domain, reading outside of your domain, and it builds on it. So you read books sometimes that refer to one thing, but you're like, oh, you're not intimidated anymore because you're like, oh, I know what he's talking about when he talks about, whatever.
And we're in such a wonderful world. If they start using these amazing highfalutin terms, Google it.
Yeah, that's right.
You can figure out what it means, you know?
I think that's a huge key is that education doesn't, like some of the best education, people see, I think even college professors would agree with this, some of the best education isn't formal. Mm-hmm. It's the stuff that you're motivated to learn on your own.
And that was why that's why your education meant so much to you, because you didn't want to go out of high school. So it's great, don't go.
No.
But when you went, you were motivated to go.
And I knew what I wanted to do.
You saw the need for it.
And I saw the need for the classes I was going to take. And of course, my undergrad was in political science. It was like a pre-law degree. And I'm grateful for a lot of that. I ended up in the counseling world, but a lot of the stuff I learned about philosophy from politics carried over. Again, it builds, carried over into the way I see counseling. So it all ties. Everything's connected in some way.
Yeah. But you can find, and that's the thing is, if you find a book, you're probably not going to find a college course that really meets that hunger within your heart of exactly what you want to know.
That's true. But
you can find books that do, and read a few of those books, and get that into you. And if you need help with it, again, you call somebody. Most people are willing to help you out. If you're having a question about accounting or something,
Yeah.
you can probably find somebody that'd be glad to explain something to you.
So let me end with something controversial. How much is an education worth? Is it worth 6 to 10 years of paying off college debt?
I don't think anybody should get out of college owing debt.
Even if it's like a science, technology, engineering field?
It might be a different situation medical. If you can, if you're going to be able, if you're guaranteed you're going to have a job.
Yeah.
And you can pay it off within a few years.
Right.
And I understand there are some degrees that you can't do it bit at a time. It's this program, this is the set program, you got to go through it in 2 years, you got to go through it in 4 years or something like that. So that's kind of an exception.
Some cohort masters and stuff degree, like you have to end with the cohort you start with, right?
But it still could be like buying a car. You can either pay it off over 5 years and pay a tremendous amount of interest, or wait 5 years and make those payments to a savings account and pay cash when you go.
Yeah.
So you could wait a couple of years before you go through that 2-year program. And then at least you may still get out with some debt.
Yeah.
But you at least aren't going to have that huge amount hanging over your head. And the thing about it is, that's what, when we were saying earlier, it's such a scam. The scam part of it is this. They realize we can loan you the money because you're only 20 years old. You're not smart enough to know what $100,000 is. And so you go, hey, man, they're going to pay me. I can party. I can go to school. I can drive a new car.
If you're a fool, you're saying that.
Yeah. Well, how many are saying that?
Well, unfortunately.
Because at that age, you're not really a fool. You just don't know anything.
And naive. Yeah, it's more naivete.
You're a knucklehead. And you don't know you're a knucklehead. And they'll let you sign on the line.
Right.
And you're committed for it. It's a scam. And it is an immoral scam.
Well, and when you've got people willing to lend you any amounts of money,
right?
Then the school's like, oh, then we can jack our prices.
Exactly.
And then you go, of course, it's just like a business.
And it's to their advantage to help you get that scholarship or help you get that grant.
Yeah.
Or help you get that loan. So we'll loan you the money because who really gets it? It comes to us.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway.
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things, you talked about waiting, maybe something like waiting. And sometimes we feel the pressure to get this degree. And sometimes, that is what's stopping us from moving forward, is getting the degree. And if that is where you're at and you're afraid to go back to school, let me tell you this, it's not that hard.
It's not. I went thinking it was going to be this really, it's just big high school.
No, it's like, and dude, they'll let anybody into community college.
Yeah.
Like if you can't get into I tell people that all the time. Like I always thought I couldn't get into a college because my teacher was like, your grades. And I'm like, until I found out about community college, they'll let anybody in, man.
Let me tell you a secret too. If you're having a hard time passing the college test, put B for the answer.
B
will get you through. That's how I got into college. On the math portion, I had no idea, man. I was bad at math and it had been so long since I did it. I just put B on everything. And when I came to get my results, they said, you did really well in math. I kid you not.
That did not work for me.
That did for me. Well, maybe they've changed.
But that's
it to
another
C
thing
now.
about it too. Is
B or C.
That's another thing though, is people get intimidated because like, well, I'm not very good at math. Hey, you know what? There are entire degrees that you can take that don't require
no
math.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so all that to say is, I think we should constantly be seeking education. But if you can't necessarily afford the formal education, don't be intimidated. I mean, don't belittle just choosing to educate yourself. And then if you're afraid to go back into college, don't be intimidated by it's going to be so hard because, man, I mean,
I realized you can get through college if you have enough money and enough time.
That's exactly right.
I have friends who, she's a medical professional now, and she took chemistry 3 times, and the 4th time she just passed out of grace of the teacher. Felt sorry for her.
Like, you've given us enough money. Move along.
I mean, and she got the degree, and she's a medical professional now. But never did pass chemistry.
Which is scary, but
I know.
Anyway, So I think that's the essence of education is really, so education is just, it's like a tool. It's like a key.
Sharpens the axe.
Yeah. It's another tool that you can have to get you where God wants to take you. But sometimes a lot of times you don't need that key to get where he wants to take you.
If you're dependent upon that,
Yeah.
God can open doors for you that no man can close, as the scripture says. And so your dependency needs to be on him. He's going to take you where he wants you to go. Now, if it is toward education, then don't back down from it. Don't be afraid of it.
Don't be intimidated.
But don't feel like you have to have some silly degree to go where God wants you to go. He used Peter. Peter says, add to your faith virtue, knowledge. So keep learning. But don't feel like you can't do anything for God until you've got that degree or something.
And on the other side of that, it's not cool to be proud of your ignorance.
Right.
Which
exactly.
there's a lot of people that would say that.
Nor to be proud of your education.
Pride in general, bad thing.
Bad.
If it's pride in your education or pride in your ignorance.
Pride bad, humility good.
Yeah, right on. If you liked what you heard, please consider sharing this with a friend. For more information, visit joelmalm.com or rickmalm.com. Thanks for listening.